Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Gina Smarecki, and I am the events manager at Nuspire. I'm happy to be your host for today's live session. Today's webinar features 5 of our cybersecurity subject matter experts. We're super excited to bring these security professionals together to present their predictions for 2024. If you happen to have questions during the presentation, please submit them in the Q&A tab. We'll try and leave a few minutes at the end for your questions. This webinar is being recorded, and just so you know, you will receive an email with a link to watch the recording as well. So at this time, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our speakers today: J.R. Cunningham, Steve Drohan, Mike Pedrick, Mike Mellor, and Josh Smith. J.R. Cunningham is the Chief Security Officer at Nuspire, and he's responsible for the company's global security program and consulting organization. With 27 years of experience, he's an innovator and premier thinker in cybersecurity and risk management. Steve Drohan is the Vice President of Service Delivery at Nuspire. Steve leads all operations for Nuspire, including implementation, security operations, network operations, supply chain, threat hunting, threat intelligence, SIM support, client success, and the service desk. Mike Pedrick is the VP of Cybersecurity Consulting at Nuspire. He has been providing technology, security, compliance, and risk management consulting services to organizations across several industries for nearly 20 years. Mike Mellor has over 30 years of experience in information technology, with extensive expertise in strategic planning, information security program development, information security, and IT management. Mike provides advisory services for a wide range of clients and varied industries. And last but not least, Josh Smith. He is a seasoned cyber threat analyst here at Nuspire. He works closely in organizational threat landscapes, curating threat intelligence, and authoring Nuspire's quarterly threat landscape report. All right, and so before I hand it over to our speakers, we would like to get your input on our poll. Let me go ahead and launch the poll here in Zoom. Everyone should have that popped up on their screen. So the question reads, which of Nuspire's 2023 predictions had the most impact on your business? So choose one answer from the following. 2023 is the year of IoT and consumer-centric cyber attacks. CIOs or CISOs less influential. Threat actors continue to search for low-hanging fruit. The Great Resignation exasperates talent shortage. More pressure to justify security spending, or security leadership roles being filled by unqualified leaders. We will give it just a second here. We are going to have a little review of all of last year's predictions coming up next here. So this should be really interesting. We'll give it a minute, and then I'll go ahead and just turn it over to JR.
Great. Thank you so much, Gina. Thanks to all of our panelists. It's a real privilege to be in the same room with all of you, and I certainly appreciate the effort that goes into this. For those of you that are joining us, you know that this is a big deal for us. We really enjoy doing these predictions, and part of what we enjoy about this is actually looking back and grading ourselves after the fact. So thought maybe we'd start there and look at our scorecard. Our take on this is we really didn't completely miss anything or strike out on any of these. We gave ourselves half credit for a few. I won't go through them line by line, but talk a little bit about kind of what we got right and where we missed the mark a little bit on predictions. Certainly and unfortunately, most of our predictions regarding bad guy activity came to fruition last year. We saw a lot of critical infrastructure attacks. We saw IoT and consumer-centric cyber attacks. Josh made a prediction last year that the threat actors would remain opportunistic and look for low-hanging fruit. And lo and behold, what's happening right now? Log4j attacks, even very recently here. So, certainly as far as the bad guy activity, a lot of that came to fruition. Security leadership and hiring, really kind of a mixed bag. I think we all kind of sensed that there would be, a bit of a pullback in turnover and, you quote, the Great Resignation that, that was happening. But really what happened was the market expanded at such a rate that it overcame a lot of that, that what would normally have been employment churn. So to give you some perspective, the global cybersecurity workforce grew to an all-time high of 5.5 million, which far exceeded, even like 2019, 2020, we were talking about, 2.5 to 3 million. So we certainly saw quite a change in just how many cybersecurity jobs there were out there. So while we think, that certainly had an impact on some of our predictions regarding security leadership and less kind of qualified folks in the profession, we didn't have the effect on turnover that we thought we would, simply because of the growth, in the space. Spending, I think, we were pretty much on the mark there. We knew there would be more pressure in 2023. I had predicted that CIOs and CISOs would become less influential in security purchasing, and we don't really think that happened, but rather other stakeholders in the business did become more influential and have a greater share of voice when it comes to, how we spend on security. I regret to say that we really wanted to see last year some national privacy legislation, and while we didn't see that at the national level, and Mike Pedrick can certainly talk to this a little bit more as we get into the webinar, we did see a lot of the states pick up the slack, most recently with Delaware here, and so we're in 34, 35 states now that have some sort of privacy legislation. So we gave ourselves a half a mark there. And finally, the industry, some of these were a little ambiguous, but, we really definitely feel like we nailed it on the pressure on security teams to continue to secure hybrid work. Digital transformation done or not, I'll leave that to the audience to decide, but we're certainly reading less about it than we were at this time in 2022. So with that, I'll turn it over to Josh here. So we kept the same categories as last year. You'll notice the consistency across the categories. This really makes grading easier, and we think these are pretty logical ways to group all of this. But Josh, you've got one here, regarding social engineering attacks, leveraging AI generated content. You want to talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah, thank you, JR. Absolutely. I don't think anyone that's any way, shape, or form involved with technology has not heard of ChatGPT, LLMs, things of that nature. And if you've played with it at all, you understand the power of what's behind them. Sure, they can be inaccurate at times, but generally they really can help out quite a bit with simplistic things like correcting grammar, building templates and stuff like that. And they are really good too about harvesting data, taking that in if you want to feed it a bunch of examples, and then curating stuff to spit out the other side, formatted around that. That's a really powerful tool, specifically for a lot of these threat actor groups that are overseas and English is not their primary language, but that's their primary target is US-based citizens. I guarantee anyone who's sitting here has gotten an email at some point that they've just read it and you're like, that's not right. That's, there's some kind of a red flag with the grammar. They're using words that maybe wouldn't be used within our geographical region. ChatGPT and other things like that can clean all that up for them and really make that much more difficult to detect on a user level. I really think too, we're going to start to see this really get utilized in some more sophisticated attacks too by threat actor groups, more in the circumstances of crafted, curated attacks on an organization by using their social media profiles and things of that nature. We did see the big MGM attack in 2023 was launched through initially a social engineering attack. While AI wasn't necessarily used in that, but it shows the rise and still the importance of social engineering. I think we're going to see some of these groups start to go ahead and gather up a specific targeted organizations, social media pages, profiles that will really tailor some things that can take that impact on the end user and trick them. It's only going to make things easier for them to be able to kind of slip and fly under the radar.
Josh, my grandfather had a saying. He used to say, don't believe what you hear and only half of what you see. Wow, he would need a new lesson on that with AI, right? With deep fake videos and fake voices and phone calls and everything. The world of the scammer is completely different now than it was even 2 years ago. It'll be interesting to see what specific attacks pop out of this prediction in 2024.
Absolutely. And we discuss only the cybersecurity effects with this webinar, not even to talk about just, as you mentioned, the deep fakes and the information campaigns that can be waged with this and the disinformation that can be used. It's a great tool, and it's also a double-edged sword with the way it can be maliciously abused as they figure out ways to get around the guardrails that are implemented. Props to the communities and developers that are working with these things. They're doing the best they can to go ahead and limit things and put guardrails up. But just like we see in any other technology in the world, these guys find ways to exploit it and get around that. And it's just going to be that cat and mouse game of constantly patching and updating to get around with the new holes they poked in.
Yeah, I think it speaks to just the nature of the category cyber attacks, right? This is really the slide that I think all of us hope that our predictions never come true. And keeping on top of this, these next two are really around. They have some commonality. They're around the asymmetry of cyber warfare against the Western world. So the predictions here are really that emergence of criminal and nation state threat actors from kind of the non-traditional players, right? So thinking beyond China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. I would expect that in the course of 2024 we're going to see more sophistication come out of countries that we historically haven't expected these types of attacks to emerge from. And then the corollary prediction to that is that the global conflicts that we have going on right now are going to create more opportunities for the bad guys to execute critical infrastructure attacks in the Western world. These are all related, and it's all really about asymmetry. It's very attractive to develop an offensive cyber capability for an adversary that does not have the symmetric or military warfare capabilities that that the sophisticated militaries have. And so if I'm an aspiring Western world hater in some of these lesser sophisticated countries, it's really attractive to develop this capability because it does provide a weaponization against infrastructure that we depend on here in the Western world that maybe doesn't exist in other parts of the world. So from a cyber attack point of view, we would expect to see those things. You may notice a green star here. We'll get to the green star, but pay attention to where you see a green star as we go through these predictions. Pretty fascinating. Security leadership and hiring. So I made this prediction that 2024 would be the year that Gen AI really disrupts the tech employment sector, specifically tech support, software engineering, database administration roles. I think AI is going to help us in cybersecurity in some really incredible and amazing ways. I think that these are the particular facets of the cyber and IT professions that are going to be most immediately impacted in 2024. So this isn't to say that Gen AI is going to eliminate these jobs. It's going to disrupt how those jobs are done. It's going to disrupt the types of skill set that the people that do those jobs need to keep sharp. Mike Mellor, this is a prediction that you had here regarding security professionals and AI, and you've talked a lot with your clients about the insider threats in AI. Can you talk about this second prediction?
Sure. A lot of the customers I'm working with today have a lot of apprehension about unleashing AI in their environments and some of the basic things like Microsoft Copilot, for example. And the concern around that is twofold. One, what are we going to do with the lower level jobs? Is it going to displace people? Is it just going to enhance those jobs and make them easier, make them more productive? Or they're looking at licensed people like engineers, structural engineers, civil engineers, people who have a certifying body, and what kind of things they're allowed to do under that certification, under that license. And it's creating a lot of concern for these organizations because some of those licensing bodies haven't come out with a ruling, and they're just saying, well, if they don't come out with a ruling soon, a lot of these engineers are going to start using it on their own, which could be disruptive for their environment. So there's a lot of these organizations that are putting in within their acceptable use policy what's they're making just this judgment statement for themselves, how they want AI used in their environment, what's acceptable, what's not, and moving forward with it and waiting for some of the licensing bodies to come out with some guidance.
Mike, what's the knee-jerk reaction you've seen in 2023 in working with these clients? Are they trying to rush to develop policy around AI? Are they trying to figure out technical governance for AI? Are they doing the ostrich thing and putting their head in the sand and hoping the problem solves itself? Like what do you see out in the wild?
So I'll say a year ago it was no AI. That was the knee jerk. We can't have this. Now, just over the last maybe 6 months, we're seeing that rush for policy. Let's put some guardrails in place. Let's tell our employees how to use AI in the environment, what's acceptable, what's not. And then I think I haven't had any really that are ignoring it at this point. It's really front of mind. They're really putting a lot of focus on
it. That's great to hear. When I think back to like, GDPR or CCPA passing, and for a while there was this, maybe if we ignore it, it will go away.
Right.
And all the lawsuits and all of that crazy stuff happened. And folks went, uh-oh, this is a regulatory threat. We need to deal with it. So maybe we're learning that we need to confront these things up front and head on instead of, hoping they go away.
Right. I think so. And I think what the employers are seeing is that if they don't do something, their employees are going to use it. They're going to enhance their ability to do their job. They're going to be leaning on these AI tools, and they just want to get ahead of that.
Sure. This last one is really related to the first two in the sense, and we made this prediction last year about the global talent shortage. Again, I got it half right last year. We're going to stick with this prediction for 2024 that the talent shortage will persist, but compensation is going to stabilize, may even pull back a little bit. There's a lot of uncertainty regarding the macroeconomics of the Western world at the moment. We've got wars going on, so it's really maybe anybody's guess as to how that impacts. Do we see a spike in demand for cybersecurity? Probably in certain sectors, but clearly compensation, was on a tear for a few years, and we may see it, even if we don't see a retreat, which we're predicting here, maybe a slight retreat, some sort of a stabilization in the growth of compensation, I think is probably inevitable. Things really got unsustainable, over the course of the last few years, and so I think we're ripe for a little bit of a correction here. So there's nobody in our company that is closer to our clients' technology stack as well as their needs and their financial constraints than Steve. Steve, you're working with these folks all the time. When technology works or it doesn't work or it's not there, it needs to be. And you made this prediction around consolidation. What's that look like? What's driving this prediction on your part?
Yeah, I think we'll continue to see some of the major vendors out there look to fill in holes in their portfolio. We saw it last quarter with Cisco buying Splunk, which allowed them to come up to par with Palo Alto by having the SIEM, which was kind of the missing piece for them to do that. We saw it in a little more unconventional way with Revelstoke being bought by MSSP. Don't typically see it that way, but people looking to fill holes in their portfolio by buying tools to fill those needs, and those smaller companies, get a capital infusion or maybe an exit strategy that they're looking for. So would expect to see that to continue in 24 as we go on, to see vendors, filling holes in their portfolio.
Steve, do you see is there a platform angle to this too, where customers of ours and just industry in general is fatigued with the point solutions and they want to see that consolidation? Is there a welcomeness to this in our client community?
I think to a certain degree, because they have one vendor, they can kind of stabilize support, they can stabilize support contracts, things like that. But I also think there's a little bit of fatigue of now I have fewer choices. So,
Sure.
Now I have to go with a single vendor.
Sure.
But it's been a problem in the tech industry. since IBM. They started the strategy, and we've seen HP adopt it. So it's kind of that normal strategy of just consolidations, where both customers and vendors look to provide a complete solution.
Steve, I really liked this prediction, and I decided to piggyback off of it a little bit and make a prediction about a specific technology, and that would be 2024 will be the year that we start really examining the value and necessity of SIM as a standalone point solution in a modern program, as opposed to other things. If we go back and we look at the history of SIM, it was really driven around being compliant with various regulations that said I had to log and monitor traffic on my network. And our world has changed to, I need to respond in near real time when bad things happen. So I think it's going to really call into question the value of organizations who maybe they have a SIM, but they've not done EDR, or they don't have an XDR platform. And they're looking at, okay, I'm spending this money on ingestion, log rate, data rates continue to rise. The number of events that get spit out by tools continue to rise. So I think that there's an appetite for a business conversation here in 2024 around, is SIM a standalone thing? Where does it fit in my overall program? And should I rationalize that at all?
Very much agree.
We always have to make predictions regarding the regulatory environment, standard settings, and compliance, right? And even though this world tends to be relatively static and not change, reasonably quickly, or even quick enough for our taste, given some of the threats that are out there, we really think the healthcare sector's vulnerabilities and the issues that we've had in healthcare in 2023 are going to drive some form of new either industry-specific regulation or standard in healthcare. Our healthcare sector is a mess, and that's in part because it's being managed to HIPAA. And HIPAA was not designed to be a cybersecurity standard that's risk informed, threat aware, adaptable. It's very much a static regulation. So certainly think that we're going to see something in the healthcare sector, and it might not be an actual piece of legislation. It might be more akin to PCI, where the industry gets together and sets its own standards and holds the rest of the industry accountable for it. But we certainly would welcome more safety and security in the healthcare sector. Mike Mellor, these next two are yours, and they're really near and dear to our hearts as an MSSP regarding third-party risk and governance and speaking with boards and leaders. Talk to me about these two.
Sure. So vendor management is, I see it on a rise, or at least the assessment process is taking off. More than it used to be. It used to be, okay, we knew this is a necessity, and we know we need to be managing it both from as a customer and as the supplier, both sides. So you want to be assessing your suppliers, and those suppliers need to be assessing their suppliers. That flow down needs to happen. We knew that, but what I'm seeing, and the reason I made the prediction is because I'm seeing that ramp up. I'm seeing like the SEC regulations around understanding your third parties. The regulation there is around breach response. You have four days. I guess that goes into effect Friday. So that's pretty timely. So we're going to see more of these where the third party has an issue, has an incident, and there's a breach, and they need to be able to, the first party, the organization needs to be able to respond extremely fast. So they need to know who their suppliers are. They need to know what the risk posture is of those suppliers. They need to know, how do we ensure that how do we monitor that they're continuing their program year over year? Boards are going to have to put some oversight into this area. They're going to want to see greater vision into what that vendor management process looks like, because those third parties are certainly a risk to the organization. A good example of that might be the Black Cat situation, where they had a breach. There was a breach. Black Cats was told, hey, we're not gonna be we're not going to pay that ransom. And then they went and they told the SEC that there was a breach. We're going to see more of that. That seems like an interesting strategy. Boards are going to have to be involved because the main component of the SEC regulation is that if you have a material breach, you have 4 days. You have to define material. The boards are going to have to be involved in that and understanding what's material, what's important to the organization, and having those risk conversations.
Mike, in your perspective, especially related to the vendor management aspect of this, how much of a say in governing a security program does one's customers have? Is that increasing in your opinion based on what you're seeing? Like, the expectations that, a supplier has certain controls in place as opposed to just kind of taking their word for it or assuming that those things are there?
Yeah, I think it really depends on what's being provided, but what I'm seeing is that the supplier, or actually I'll put it this way, the customer is looking to the supplier to have a certain level of security, a good posture. And they're really getting aggressive. And they're saying, well, if you don't have a SOC 2 type 2, you better prove to us by providing evidence. So we're now getting into an audit situation where they're really driving it. I think there's some fatigue around that. That's starting with because customers are saying, or the organizations are saying, hey, you're forcing my security program into a box. It needs to be following this framework, and I'm on this framework, and you're not flexible enough to understand that we're doing the same things. So that's causing a lot of fatigue.
Yeah,
I think
even
that third-party risk is a very serious concern, though, for a lot of folks. And we reach back to things such as the Target breach. Back in the day, that was through an HVAC vendor that had access to their network. SolarWinds and all their clients underneath them afterwards. I think, honestly, if anything, from a cybersecurity analyst side that keeps me up at night, per se, would be third-party supply chain attack. You've done everything right. You've implemented it all, and it's someone else's security program who has access to your network that ends up letting them in there, and they could run wild. Which I do think on the flip side too is every organization should really know, what do your vendors have access to? Are they segmented on a certain part of the network where they can't get very far if something happens? And really understanding, in that worst case tabletop scenario, this person gets breached, what can happen? And make sure you have answers for all those questions.
So to kind of add to that, I'm sorry, I want to add to what Josh just said. So let's talk about tabletop exercises for a minute. It should be outside of IT and security. You should start bringing in the management into this, and board members into the tabletop, and let them understand where you are and what those risks are.
And turn around too, point at that person. They're on PTO for the next week. What do we do now? Or, hey, they quit yesterday. What do we do now? All those circumstances that everyone needs to know. And, JR will go with me too in the old military background. It always be documented, the pre-planned responses, all those kinds of things like that.
Yep.
Josh, I'm reminded, when I think about third-party risk management, of a lesson that we all learned back when the big retail breaches, you mentioned Target, but back in 2011, 2012, there were all kinds of big retail breaches happening at that time. And I remember thinking, under no third-party risk management program I had ever designed or operated before, would the vendors that caused the compromise have been considered so critical that I would have paid any attention to them whatsoever. Yep. Right, the HVAC vendor, the Wi-Fi at TJ Maxx, all that stuff, and it was really illustrative to, this is a big problem, and it's not just big critical strategic vendors that were used to putting, some rigor around with risk management. It's everyone that has access into our environment.
Yeah, it just takes a lot more scrutiny in how to Josh's point, how you're allowing these people in. And what you're allowing them access to. It's something that has to be focused on, and a lot of organizations don't have the manpower or the bandwidth to do it.
Mike Pedrick, you write here about Gen AI and operational disruptions by outsmarting users, and corollary to this, I saw a question come in from Peter Gregory. Peter, thanks for joining. It's great to see your name here. So we'll answer that too. But Mike, what drove this? As far as what you're seeing in the wild, and why do you think 2024?
So I want to be judicious about how I say this because I don't want to be unfair to either side of the conversation. But I see sort of a decoupling of common sense on the part of a lot of folks who look to Chat GPT and similar tools to just do their jobs for them, right? So they feed in what their expected outcome is, and they take the output from the tool without even reviewing it or applying any degree of scrutiny to that content, and then passing it along as their work output. And we've seen a couple of instances this year that made the news where individuals put forth content from Chat GPT thinking it was one thing, finding out it was another, and it might have cost them, their jobs, as well as some other, having other larger ramifications, right? So there's obviously the case where a lawyer tried to create briefs to support his case using Chat GPT. The unfortunate thing is that the generative piece kicked in and all of the brief content was fictitious. It just didn't exist. And so that case was very definitely lost. And that individual was, I don't think I've heard that he was disbarred, but he certainly lost his job. There was another instance where a celebrity was under trial, and his attorney gave a presentation to the jury that was entirely generated using generative AI, and the case was lost. And so now that it's under scrutiny, that it was a bad presentation, it was a bad speech to the jury, and did that cause the outcome that came about. And so what I'm hoping is that there's a call to action, that one of two things has to happen. One, probably more inevitable than the other, right? Is that we need to start paying closer attention to what is, just a very powerful tool that is still in its infancy. We need to be paying closer attention to that output, or it needs to get better. Like I said, I think that's inevitable. I think the first generation, there's going to be some growing pains, and subsequent generations are going to be better. But I think in 2024, we're going to see more of those cases where somebody put forth output from Chat GPT or something similar, and it had wide-ranging ramifications that were unexpected.
Mike, do you see that call to action, if it does manifest itself, coming in the form of a regulatory change, or is it going to manifest itself like PCI did, where it's a consortium that gets together and starts making rules for all of us? What's your prediction on how that plays out in 2024?
Well, obviously, we just saw a recent executive order announced by the White House around AI and the use of AI, but it was really sort of a call to say, we want everybody to be paying more attention to this, closer attention to this, especially looking for indications of overt bias on the part of tool sets, et cetera. It wasn't really a binding regulation sort of thing, but I think that it was a signal to other entities to initiate such processes, right? Like, hey, open season, let's start talking about that regulatory landscape. But what I didn't see in the verbiage there was centered around human interaction with those tool sets. And that's the piece I'm sort of focusing in on with this prediction specifically. And I'm going to use a very archaic, very curmudgeonly reference, right? I think about the institution of spell check in our lives. There's a lot of folks who rely on spell check and grammar check fairly heavily, to the extent that they no longer have the ability to adequately review the output and perform their own spell check and grammar check analyses. And that's not a dig at them. That's not an attempt to talk about the dumbing down of society, but it's potentially a skill set that we might have assumed previously that has sort of fallen by the wayside. And my concern is that we're not talking about sentence structure. We're not talking about spelling with Chat GPT and similar tools. We're talking about reality, the very reality of our society. If I read something that is entirely fictitious and just take it as fact, every action I take after that is colored similarly.
You remind me with a spell check example of, I'm not sure when, but courtesy of this device, I've lost my ability to navigate a car by reading street signs, or actually doing anything other than staring at the map, right? The Hudson Street Atlas is not really a thing anymore. But I certainly agree with you that something along those lines, is needs to happen with regards to AI. The executive order that came out, let's just pull on that thread a little bit. Did it go far enough, or did it go too far? Was it, what's your kind of practitioner take on where we're at in 2023? And I ask because obviously this time next year, we're going to go back and look at all this and say, okay, well, did we see anything meaningful come out of that or not? What's your initial kind of pre-2024 gut reaction on the EO?
There's two schools of thought there. The first is that an EO it doesn't carry the weight of law, right? That isn't specifically legislation. But every time I've heard that statement said, I hasten to add that we have precedent for executive orders becoming the law of the land by virtue of the fact that they've never been challenged. It just became normalized, right? And so, again, on the one hand, it's a EO, it's not a law. On the other hand, it's an EO, and we should take it seriously. Now, in terms of the content, there was again a whole lot of calls for, we need to institute a committee, we need to call together experts, we need to come up with a strategy, which I think is the prudent maneuver now. The other thing that I find heartening about the executive order is there are several very real timelines, and actually very short timelines outlined in that executive order. So it's not an open-ended, yeah, we should have a conversation sometime about a thing. The clock is running. The meter has started on a lot of what's in that executive order.
Well, this will be fascinating, and I think we all, obviously, by virtue of the fact that we put it up here, we believe this is going to come to fruition. It'll be interesting to see how that journey unfolds in 2024. Steve, these next two are yours, and they're not necessarily related to each other than they come from you being really plugged into what you're hearing in the field from our clients. You work with them every day. You're working with the SOC and the NOC. These two predictions, one of them, by the way, near and dear to my heart, because we at Nuspire have spent a lot of time talking to the industry about cyber insurance in general and all of that. But talk us through these next couple.
Yeah, I think we'll start to see cyber insurers begin to offer more cybersecurity solutions to their clients. We're already seeing this with incident response after the fact. I think it's very reactionary. We read and hear all the time of insurance payments denied because they didn't take precautionary measures or they were lax in their security. I think what we see is some of, especially smaller companies in the small market and probably lower end of the small to mid market, they can't afford some of these solutions. So I think there's a real opportunity that we'll start to see cyber insurers go after because they can get the money for those services, they can help protect those clients, and they can get the insurance premiums on top of it. So I think we'll start to see some of that. And then moving on to the security data lakes, we're starting to see a shift in the industry overall, with less of logs staying by themselves, your firewall logs kind of being separated from your email filter logs, separated from your cloud logs, separated from your, Microsoft or Google logs. We have all these point solutions that we talked about earlier. They've all been kind of separate. They come together in the SIM, but it's still not an easy thing to look through all of them. I think with big data and a lot of the machine learning that we're seeing, a lot of the AI that we're talking about, having all of this data together in a big data lake becomes much easier for those tools to look across things, to spot trends, to spot attacks that may be low and slow, that not going to jump out to anybody. JR, you mentioned, the SIM's kind of becoming more of a point tool rather than the full solution. And I think a lot of that's predicated on these data lakes gaining prominence. The other thing that we're starting to see clients say, can I bring my own security data lake? So they don't want that data to live in the SIM. They want to have it in their data lake so that they can control their logs. They can control, how they search for them. Some of our larger clients, they have staffs as well that we work in tandem with. So they want to be able to have the same access to it and be able to search and use some of the same tools. So I think we're going to start to see those security data lakes become more and more of a thing, both in our industry and the MSSP side, as well as the larger enterprise clients.
Steve, are you seeing some of this being driven by a desire to respond faster, have all the data together, or enable automation, or is this a cost savings play? Like what's driving this, at least that you can see so far in 2023?
I think it's the ability to respond faster. When you're looking at 4 or 5 data sources, you've got to be able to correlate what's going on between them. You've got to be able to, search all of those things. People like Josh we have to have people like Josh, going through all those things. But if we can have everything in one, then we can put some automated tools. So when we get it over to Josh and his team, we can use their big brains to figure out what the next step is or to shut it down. Right now, a lot of times the bad guys are in there for long before any of us can find them just because of the way they came in. And now we should be able to find them sooner with a solution like this.
Fantastic stuff, Steve. And again, really appreciate the fact that, this is informed by, your team's direct interaction with all of our clients across a wide variety of industries in various states of maturity. So I'd be shocked if we didn't see these come to, to further fruition, especially the cyber insurance. We've already certainly seen cyber insurance panels, not just say you have to have an IR provider, but call out specifically which ones, you're expected to use in order to have services covered. So certainly the foundations have already been set for these things to become a practical reality in 2024. And I think you'll all see here that in all of these predictions, the hints of some of these are already there, or the wheels are already in motion. It's just about how complete does that thing happen over the course of the next year. And that's what drives a lot of these predictions. These last few, autonomous systems security, and we talk about autonomous systems, we're not just talking about self-driving cars. We've obviously seen some regulatory and technical hiccups with vehicular autonomy happen. But at the same time, there's a whole bunch of other stuff happening in autonomy. The FAA has approved certain circumstances for beyond visual line of sight for drone operations, which clears some hurdles for more autonomous agricultural drone use and drone delivery. We certainly see on factory floors all over the world, more automation. But we see automation in places that we probably a decade ago or a half a decade ago wouldn't have expected to see them. You go to a fast food restaurant, you're more likely to interact with an automated experience now than you were 5 years ago. So the prediction here is that autonomous systems security will make headlines in some way in 2024. We'll see either, hopefully not a serious failure of security, but maybe a focus on it that'll emerge out of 2024. I think we all know that, unfortunately, a lot of times bad things have to happen before we start putting controls in place. Hope that's not the case here, but certainly we're going to be reading headlines around autonomous system security. This next prediction, and I put 6 in here, it could be 4, it could be 8, it could be 30, don't know. But I think the trend here is that IT solution providers are beginning to be asked by their customers, do you also do security? And if the answer equals no, they're at a competitive disadvantage. So I think we're going to see IT solution providers and MSPs start to either merge, consolidate, form partnerships, acquire, whatever it may be with MSSPs, so that there's more one-stop shopping between the IT and the security, programs. Up to today, it's been very popular to say pure play security or pure play IT. And I think there's going to be renewed pressure to consolidate some of that throughout 2024. This next prediction, if I could ask, for only one of them to come true, this would be the one that I would really love to see. I think by the end of 2024, passwords will still exist, but they will not be the default relationship that you start with an application or a vendor, meaning your first opportunity to authenticate will come in the form of a pass key or some sort of biometric authenticator using your smartphone, a security key. 2 years ago, we were really not even talking about things like USB-C or NFC security keys, and now they're very prominent. So could it be possible that, and we, of course, in our industry, we've been predicting the death of the password for decades, and they continue to hang around. But could it be possible that in 2024, the default is not a password-centric relationship with an application or a service provider? I think we're on the cusp of that happening. I really hope it happens in 2024. A lot of big companies are supporting passkeys now. Even in 2023, we've seen a lot of major providers support passkeys. So let's hope that continues. The world is a better place the faster we get rid of the password as a default, and inevitably at some point get rid of it entirely. And then, this is certainly the year that, cyber is, where we start, or space is where we start applying some cyber principles. Space-based assets have become a critical part of our modern society. They become a critical part of how global economies operate. Obviously, we have, private companies delivering, services in space today. So we're going to see more focus and headline on safeguarding space-based assets in 2024. And I don't just mean the new stuff, also the old stuff that's going to become attractive for cyber attack. A lot of old equipment up there using old programming languages that we're going to have to figure out how to defend in a way that we really didn't up until now. So then I think we're going to see more of that, as Buzz Lightyear would say, to infinity and beyond for the cybersecurity industry. In 2024. The green star, and Peter, I'm going to get to your question here in the context of this. So our 2024 predictions, everyone that had that green star that I asked you to pay attention to, those were all predictions that had something to do with AI or machine learning. What's really fascinating about this is last year we had 0 predictions regarding AI or machine learning. I think that just speaks to how much AI has, not necessarily if it hasn't disrupted our industry yet, which obviously we're predicting some of those disruptions in 2024. We certainly are paying attention. And if you look at these panelists here and a lot of the writing that we at Nuspire have done and a lot of the noise in the industry, AI, large language models, machine learning are clearly, front and center to, what we're paying attention to. And certainly we're going to see some impact in 2024 driven by AI. Peter Gregory asked a question here. Do we foresee opportunities where we, the defenders, can use AI proactively rather than the knee-jerk, responding to AI-equipped bad guys and being outflanked by them? Peter's comment here is it seems like we're often behind the 8 ball and it'd be nice to be taking the initiative for once. Peter, I see huge opportunity for AI to make us all better at what we do. Where we're already seeing this, certainly, and Josh could speak to this, and threat intelligence and being able to more quickly determine commonality with threat actors and relationships between different criminal syndicates. AI is going to help us with that in ways that we can't possibly imagine. Certainly the regulatory environment and helping discern what controls are most likely to keep me out of trouble based on who bad actors are. AI is going to help with that. Revolutionizing the user experience, I think, is something where AI is going to give us a little bit of a leg up. The difficulty about providing cybersecurity services today is that you're often working with clients that don't maybe necessarily know what problem they're trying to solve or what technology is the right answer. And AI is certainly going to help us with some of that. And then finally, and Steve and I were just talking about this morning, I think AI is going to really accelerate the solving of what's a 2.5 to 3 decade old problem, which is vulnerability management. AI is going to help us with vulnerability prioritization. We always have that conversation around what CVSS score should I patch within 2 days or 5 days or 30 days. Wouldn't it be great if AI could help us by saying, you have this particular vulnerability on this high criticality asset and the bad guys are actively exploiting it. Go patch that one right now and we'll deal with the rest later on. So certainly think there's some opportunity for AI to help us there. Team, any other thoughts on where AI is going to give us the advantage over the course of 2024 to Peter's question?
Yeah, actually, I would think also sandboxing and malware analysis, things like that. But yes, we run things through a sandbox, already kind of gives you a report, but also being able to really get down to that code level to also execute and look at the behavior detections behind things. I think it'll really be able to amplify that. And the big thing that you kind of stole some thunder, what I was thinking was the vulnerability management and specifically the pairing of threat intelligence automatically with those things to be able to say, yes, those are all critical 10s, but you have this, that's facing externally, that's what needs to be patched first over the internal or, whatever the circumstances are from there. I think that's where we're going to really see a lot of help on that. And then ultimately I'd wrap it up too with detection engineering and things like that too, creating behavioral based rules around things that get past just a half IP domain, things like that, get away from those atomic indicators and those really niche detection rules that focus on a TTP versus something that changes so frequently and quickly like an IP or a domain.
Awesome. Anybody else have any thoughts about AI and what it's going to do for us over the course of the year? Really fascinating when we think about, again, the fact that in 2022, this time last year, we really hadn't made any predictions around this, and we're talking a lot about how do we effectively use it. Peter, one more kind of corollary to your question. Steve and I were talking this morning about ways that we can leverage AI to create a better experience for consumers of cybersecurity services. This stuff is complex, and there are a lot of buzzwords and acronyms, and it's difficult to communicate to non-technical stakeholders. So I think there's going to be some benefit to just the whole technical writing domain, or communicating with non-security stakeholders that AI can help with. To Mike Pedrick's point earlier, it's not going to, hopefully not going to be writing content for us, because as we've seen, that might not be the best thing, at least right now. Last time I checked, anything that hallucinates probably shouldn't be in the cybersecurity profession. So we're still working through some of the the early stage development hiccups of AI, and by the way, a lot of other things that we made predictions around, right? Autonomy, autonomous vehicles and things like that. There are going to be both regulatory and technical hurdles that are bumps in the road towards some of the vision that we've laid out, but we really think there's a high degree of probability that a lot of this stuff does in fact happen in 2024.
JR, may I challenge that comment real quick?
Sure.
Who among us can say that we've never hallucinated before?
Well, that's fair. How about this? Any entity with a proven track record of hallucination probably, and we certainly can say that about AI today, right? There's a little bit of a track record of hallucination there, but yeah, that's a good point. Fascinating. So we've got some resources here before I hand it back to Gina. Gina, thank you so much for getting this group together. This is an impossible group of people to get in the same room at the same time. So thank you so much for doing that. And I'll hand it back to you before we open up for Q&A.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Absolutely. This was amazing. I want to thank all of you for being here and sharing your knowledge and insights, because this was some really, really interesting and thought-provoking predictions for the coming year. Shall we, though, take a look at the poll results from earlier? So I had published that. Are you guys able to still see that? So the most votes was threat actors remain opportunistic, searching for low-hanging fruit at 45%. Any comments? I know, Josh, I know that was your prediction. Do you want to make a comment about that prediction from last year with the top vote here?
Absolutely. I would have predicted it again if it wouldn't have been cheating, but I did that last year, so I tried to stretch myself out and come up with something different. But I don't want to call threat actors lazy. They're opportunistic, and they will only reach as far up as we force them as a cybersecurity community. If we don't continue to raise the bar, they will meet exactly where they have to. Log4j, as JR was mentioning earlier, it's a big campaign that's coming out right now where they're targeting that because there's still 4% of exposed servers are still vulnerable to that. And that was 2 years ago, patches came out for that. Until we as a community do better to get away from this low-hanging fruit, that's what they're going to go after, because Why spend the cycles, the resources, the dev time to create new, better, bigger 0 days when the old stuff still works?
Josh,
Yeah.
we have these stickers that we hand out. It says patch your,
Yep.
I'll use a different word, stuff. But is that the message of the day? Patch your stuff, people.
That's what I beat my desk on at every quarterly threat report webinar too. And I know it's very easy from, the security side to say, hey, patch all of your stuff. But really the message I would leave everyone with is get an idea of what your tech stack is, know what is externally facing, and start there and work your way in, work in criticality and take care of that stuff, because that's what they're looking for. It's not these crazy 0 days you see within the news. Yeah, people do take advantage of those things, but it's a lot of things they can scan on the exterior and just find old outpatched stuff with a high remote code execution vulnerability to it. That's what they're exploiting for everyday businesses out there.
Awesome. Well, you talked about the threat report, and so I did want to quickly mention our next webinar, which is coming up here, first webinar of the next year, January 31st, where we will have our analysts, including Josh, on to review the findings from our latest quarterly cyber threat report, along with the full year in review analysis. So that'll be a good one. I'm gonna share a link in the chat for anyone who might be interested in attending that. You can go
Little
ahead.
spoiler, Log4j is the top across like all the quarters.
All right. And then we also have a bunch of other resources here that we felt were worth sharing. I'm going to paste them also into the chat for everybody. You can go ahead and check those out later if you want to click on them, but we will also send them to you in the email that also includes the recording of this session if you want to look back on any of these resources. Let me throw those in the chat for everyone. The ebook there is a really good one that goes along with tech stack optimization and the tools, the cybersecurity tools there. So, all right. Anyone else from the audience have any questions? Let's see here.
Last chance, Q&A.
So here's a question. We have about 3 minutes left, so maybe we can hit everyone real quickly here. What prediction concerns you the most, and or what do you hope doesn't come true? I'm going to start with Mike Pedrick.
What do I hope doesn't come true? Gosh, candidly, I think one of the items that caught my attention as JR was talking about it was space-based protections, because I was thinking to myself, heaven forfend, our next distributed denial of service attack that breaks the record comes from space. That would just be a whole new level of science fiction coming true.
All right, Mike Mellor.
Well, that caught my attention as well. So I think the autonomous, the work around autonomous and the breakout or expanding autonomous capabilities. I think what I wouldn't want to see there is kind of a, I'm gonna change it just a little bit. What I wouldn't want to see there is that somebody attacks that model that's driving those autonomous vehicles or manufacturing equipment, and creates havoc within that environment. So I kind of took it a little bit further.
Awesome, thanks, Mike. And Josh?
I'm gonna piggyback, I believe it was on Mike's about the generative AI disruption, thinking more about that, and specifically what I really wouldn't want to see in 2024 is some kind of software or major sort of development using ChatGPT. Someone builds a startup business and uses ChatGPT to develop their software because they don't have those folks, and it just riddles it with vulnerabilities because it doesn't know any better. That gets released to market, and then bam, organizations are breached because of that.
All right, how about you, Steve?
For me, I'll go a completely different direction. JR's prediction of global conflict leading to critical infrastructure attacks. I think that could just be that could be catastrophic across the world.
I would have to agree. That's my pick as well. JR, what about you?
I think my hope is centered around the AI conversation. We know there are going to be bumps in the road. We know there are going to be technical hurdles. We know there are going to be a lot of robust conversations and debate around policy around AI. My hope is that we don't have any kind of knee-jerk reaction that sets us back from an innovation point of view or makes us run away from this. There's so much good to be had with the advancement of this technology if it's harnessed properly. And I hope that we don't take that first technical hurdle and throw our arms up in the air and do something brash from either a regulatory point of view or from a business perspective, run away from this technology. The whole Thomas Edison and the light bulb thing, right? It took 10,000 tries, and we're at like try number 3 or 4 on a lot of this AI stuff, and there's going to be a lot of learning that happens over the course of the next year. I hope we don't let a bad event or two cause us to do anything brash or give up on the technology, because the potential good for humanity, especially when it comes to healthcare and taking care of people, is really significant.
Great points. Well, we are at the top of the hour here, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. If anyone does come up with any other questions for our team, you can feel free to email us at webinars@nuspire.com or contact us on our website at nuspire.com, and I will make sure to get those routed to the correct folks. Also, just quickly, there's a brief 3-question survey when you exit the webinar. If you'd like to give us any feedback, we'd certainly appreciate that. Other than that, any closing thoughts from any of our speakers today?
Thanks everyone for joining. Really, really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, on behalf of Nuspire, thank you for joining us, and everyone have a great rest of your day.